Like I've said it once, I've said it a million times, and I'm going to keep saying it until somebody listens to me. Settings are not genres. Genres are not settings. A genre is the type of story, the story structure, the structure of the story. I don't know how else to put that. The setting is what it looks like. Right? It's very clear in my head. I don't. It's just getting across. It's like if someone said, oh, "Hey, where do you live?" and you say, "Oh, I live in a building," and then they go, "Okay, what kind of building?" and you say, "The building is green." That's what it's like to describe a story by its setting rather than its genre. Any type of building can be green. Any type of story can fit within a setting, but only genres are a particular type of story. You can't have multiple genres inside of one story, for the most part. I just watched a very famous creator. She's got an account here. And she was saying, well, science fiction, it's kind of like a party for all these different kinds of stories. It's all these wildly different kinds of stories, but they're all science fiction. Like they're all having a party and they're putting on sci-fi hats. That's exactly right. Science fiction is not a genre, it's a setting. Fantasy is not a genre, it's a setting. My cat came over to tell me to chill out. Hello, robot. You can say hi to everybody. Hello. Okay, okay. So to give you an example of what I'm talking about, the first book of A Song of Ice and Fire, A Game of Thrones, it's not fantasy. It's not low fantasy. It is a detective novel. It's a detective novel, and the setting is low fantasy. That's a good example. So rather than run down the list of what is a setting and what is a genre, I kind of have like a real basic sort of way of explaining this, basically. Um, the setting can be changed and the story stays the same. So you take a story and you say, okay, here's the story. Here's the characters. Here's all the story beats. Here's the antagonist. Here's their big fight, blah, blah, blah. And then if you can take that story and then make it medieval, and if you can take that story and put it on a spaceship or make it contemporary, um, if you can change the settings, then you're talking about the genre, right? But if you describe it as its setting, you say it's a sci-fi, you can't make that a fantasy because that's a setting. It's not the story. So why is this important? I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's not. But, we have this indie author influx where we're radically changing the literature landscape and the old system of how we classify books. The Dewey Decimal System is problematic, and if you want to look up information on that, you are welcome to. But more to the point, it is wholly inaccurate and entirely useless when it comes to finding interesting books. For example, if you like a certain kind of story, let's say romance, which is a genre, the romance genre, and then you say, okay, I want to read romance stories. Now you can pick and choose your settings. Where do you want your romance to take place, right? That makes an intuitive amount of sense. You can get a romance in any kind of setting because romance is a genre, it's not a setting, right? So when us authors publish our works and we're trying to get the word out, it's easier to describe the type of story and then say where it's set rather than say the setting and then people are like, okay, but what is it about? I write science fiction. Okay, but that doesn't tell you anything about what the story is about, which is adventure. I write in the adventure genre, and the setting in my first novel is sci-fi. Now, I talk about this at length in my The Rough Drafter, Guide to Rough Drafting for the Indie Author book. And the one negative review I got on this book, the guy called me out and said I was making up a whole bunch of nonsense about genres and none of that was real. Yeah, and none of it's real. And I'm making all this up. It's fair enough, right? But the idea is that it's supposed to be helpful. It's supposed to be helpful as a marketing tool for authors and as a way to find cool new books for readers, is just an accurate way to describe the story you're getting into. The genre describes the structure of the story. what the characters go through in their journeys. The settings are where the story takes place. Place, time. That's settings. Genres can take place in any setting. Any setting. You can take a genre story, swap the setting around, and you've got kind of the same story, but also different. That's how settings work. And you can blend and mix settings to your heart's content. You want fantasy, you want sci-fi, you can mix those together. Sure. 1940s historical drama, like anything you want. You can just mix them together because settings are like they're like paint, right? It's the paint you put on the sculpture of the story. And that is my rant. So, does this make sense to anybody? Like, am I really just out here on my own being like, genre should describe the story and settings are not genres? Maybe I'm just crazy.